Welcome to Sky Valley Studios. Today's episode, back chair legs. The next part that we're going to be working on is the back legs, the mortises for receiving the rails for the back and the sides. We'll start with the back part because that's a little bit simpler than going to the front, to the side rails that have additional angles to take into consideration. The back is a little bit different than the front legs in that we don't have the angles cut off, and there's a curve to the leg, so we can't just lay the leg down and measure the 1/4 inch. And instead, we have the center of the mortise drawn in based on the width of the full mortise and a 1/4 inch offset from the back of the chair. And in order to determine where to set the PantoRouter so that it lines up correctly, we've put in a centering jig into the router. We bring that up. I'll show this out of adjustment. Okay. Because this adjusts up and down, we can bring this up to the piece of work, find our line with that point, which is much more precise than using a router bit that's not going to give you the exact center. And you can see that it follows the line right along with it. If I move move this over to the other mortise, then you'll see that it's still lined up with the line that we drew. Okay, so we've got our 1/4 inch bit in. We'll be routing the same way we did with the front legs. And I'm going to put the collar on for dust collection. On the back legs, for the back side, the top one is a shallow cut and the bottom cut is the deep cut. So we'll bring it up, measure this one to 3/4 inch. And turn the vacuum cleaner on. That one clamp that's holding the thing on. Square. Okay, so this should be lined up in the same place, it's the same height up from the table. The bit will still come in on that same line. And this time the top end is here, so this end is, that end is the bottom and it's deep, and the end towards me is going to be shallow. The back legs add a second complication when you're working on the side cut, because you have a square piece instead of having the angles already cut. And in order to get this mortise that comes in, this is actually the side coming in, leaning back, chair leaning back, so this would be where the side enters in to the mortise. It's actually set here because we're going to be cutting away a significant amount of this material. So it's much farther in than this back one was from the outside. The complication is that the mortise needs to come in at an angle, and that's not parallel with this side as it currently is cut. We're going to be cutting that later. The reason we don't want to cut that now already is because there's some sculpting to this side where it curves outward, and a lot of that's done by hand. We want to butt that up with the bottom, and we have to make sure that the leg lines up square with the table. You can see here I have a gap, so this needs to be brought forward some to be lined up with the table. In order to get that angle, we've cut out a riser. PantoRouter is kind of versatile and makes this a whole lot easier than trying to do the mortises any other way. It gets them uniform. We have this set up with the angle of all of our chair parts so that we have an accurate angle measured. So we loosen these up and the table will tilt, and I've marked this side as for the up and down facing, and this is facing up on the top side up. We just set that in on as a support, fits in tightly, and we can tighten our table up. That ensures we get the same angle every time. PantoRouter does have a gauge on the side. There's this arm that comes down and has several markings, but this is a setting that having a jig like that makes sure it's uniform every time. Next part we're going to have to do is center again. And once again, we'll be measuring everything from the inside of the leg, which is a consistent distance every time on every single leg. So once we center this, it's going to be a little bit different. You can see that it's just a tiny bit too low on this line from where we had it before, and that's partly the result of tilting the side in like that. So we're going to have to recenter our router on that line. Our leg is clamped in, and we'll be doing, if you recall, the side, the bottom one, which is the end towards you, is going to be the short side, and the long tenon is towards the top end, or towards me on this particular leg. This is a test piece of a mortise, lining up it in the centers and the height up from the table that we'll set this face on, and that'll give us the mortise exactly the correct height, and it'll take up the correct shape and placement and layout on each of these. As I lay out my legs on the PantoRouter table, I'm also going to do a double check with the router bit, bringing it close in to make sure that each of the corners are correctly laid out, just as a double check to make sure that this center line where it lines up is actually centered. These are done straight in, so there's no angling of the PantoRouter table, and that'll be our housing. And this is what's going to be housed, is this amount here. So it's a 1/4 of an inch that gets buried, but at the bottom it's significantly more. It's about a 1/2 inch down here on the bottom, because this angle is about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom to the top. So our router depth is going to be set to a 1/2 inch, and up here it'll end up at 1/4 of an inch once we trim away some of this leg. The front part of the leg will be trimmed back this direction, exposing another additional 1/4 of an inch or so. So that's our plan. I've marked the legs here for receiving the stretchers, and I've marked the center point that is 14 1/8 inches is what it comes out to from the top of the chair rail to the center point of the stretcher mortise, and the distance in from the outside edge is equal to the center of the rail mortise as well. My stretchers are just a little bit thinner, narrower than the rails, but that'll make it very pleasing to the eye, the way everything comes out. So I've marked lefts and rights, and when I put this on the PantoRouter, I need to make sure that the angle matches the angle up here. On the front legs, it'll be just straight in, laying this on the PantoRouter, and it'll dig in at the angle that's already cut on the ends of these. I've also figured out that rather than using the 1 3/16 of an inch tenon, I'm going to cut these tenons all back to about 1 inch for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's plenty long, but primarily when you put in the 1/8 of an inch housed mortise and then you put the tenon in on top of that, it doesn't give a whole lot of room and support behind that. And 1 inch is going to be plenty long. It's actually 1 1/8 inches long that'll be housed inside of the legs. So I'm going to cut that back. It's going to make it a little bit easier for me also when it comes to doing the back legs. The back legs also get an angle that's equal to the sides, so that it actually it'd be this way. It's going to make a straight line on the side of the chair so that your legs don't come out at a different angle than what the side rails are. So that means I lose some of this material, and with the tenons effectively coming in, if I can do this here, with the effective tenons coming in at this point, that puts them pretty far to the back. I'm cutting away a little bit of this front part, but I'm also cutting back some of this back, shaping that a little bit with a slight curve to the back leg. So this curve that I'm cutting in here comes in even closer to where that tenon would be, and I don't want to jeopardize cutting away and exposing that tenon. I don't want a through tenon. The mortise that I'm going to be cutting in is the one that I laid out for the stretcher guide. It's using the square template that I made the other day to cut those in on the PantoRouter. So I always make sure I cut a test piece before I do the final, and this is my test hole that I just routed using the 1/4 inch bit on the outside and the inside, and the 9mm follower on the outside with a 22mm follower to get the inside offset. comes out just perfect for my tenons to be able to fit into those for my stretchers. The other reason for shortening my tenons to 1 inch is that my 1/4 inch router bit is only about 1 3/8 of an inch long for its cutting surface. So I really don't have much deeper to be able to go than the 1 1/4 inches deep total. So, and we're ready to start our final real deal legs here. Got my test piece done. It came out perfectly, lined up correctly for the height, for the outside matching the outside of the other mortise, and center matching center the way it should. My angle table angle is set correctly and locked in place, and ready to go. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time.